everyone, Jess with Emotional Fire Academy today to talk about self-care versus damage control and what the difference is and why it matters to you as a highly sensitive person. So stay tuned to the end. This is really valuable content. It took me a long time to figure this out, and once I did, it made a world of difference. So subscribe to my channel. I make new videos every week about what it's like to be a highly sensitive person. And who am I? I am Jess. I am your driver operator in this journey into HSP land. I am a veteran firefighter and an emotional engineer, here to share some tips and tricks with you today. So let's jump right in, shall we? So, damage control versus self-care. This is an important topic to me because, again, this took me a long time to figure out. They're actually different, right? The goal of both is to reduce chaos. So you want to reduce entropy, the chaos that you're experiencing in your life. It's just a matter of whether you're reducing it beforehand or after. So let's kind of differentiate between these two things. They're actually kind of mindsets. So self-care is preventative, right? We do it before we have any type of emotional insult, before we experience something that might kind of injure us mentally, physically. And then it's also proactive. So it's going to help, something from happening down the road. And it's going to maintain our mental state through whatever we might experience in life. Just like with your car, either you're going to do preventative maintenance or you're going to pay for repairs. It's the same thing with your body and your mind as a highly sensitive person. Damage control, obviously, it's in a sense of preservation, right? You've already had this, something kind of broke or needs fixed, and so now you have to respond to it. So it's very reactive. It's very after the fact. It takes a lot of energy, and then you're kind of in a position, just like with your car, where you're going to pay more money, and essentially you're going to pay more energy for being a highly sensitive person. You're going to spend more time paying energy forward to try and fix or remedy whatever happened. And so again, which one would you prefer to do? It's kind of like your car. Your mental health works the same way, right? It's a spectrum. So either you are doing self-care or you're doing damage control, but you are going to be on the spectrum somewhere. So the more self-care you're doing, the less damage control you're doing, right? The more damage control you're doing, the less energy you have to do self-care. So we get to pick as highly sensitive people. And what I learned is that when I was really in my lowest points, I was down here on the scale. I was experiencing just constant emotions, constant, crying, sadness, depression, and having to react to them and deal with them. And then as I developed healthier and healthier habits, I moved up the scale into the area I like to inhabit now, where I have a lot of really good self-care routines. And some might say, well, what's the difference, right? It's both kind of taking care of yourself. One's just after the fact. The difference is where your body and mind are, because if you are in damage control, a damage control mentality, your brain is probably going to be in fight or flight. Your options are going to seem kind of limited. You might behave in some toxic patterns, resorting to drugs and alcohol. You're just not going to have as many options because your mindset is going to be reactive, right? You're reacting to what happened to you. And so it's easy to go into the amygdala. That's the part of our brain that initiates fight or flight. And so our options are limited to fight or flight. When we're doing self-care, we're actually in a higher frequency brain pattern. We are in more of our prefrontal cortex. We have more options available to us. Our creativity is more available to us. And so the world seems like a brighter place, right? We're doing all this stuff to help ourselves, and we're in a more expansive mindset. And so again, these are about brain activity. Brain activity is really important for the highly sensitive person and their mental health. We want to have the highest, brain frequency possible. We want to use parts of our brain that help us and that we're not fighting against. Because trying to fight against your amygdala in a fight or flight response is a challenge. It's hard. Like when you're in that mindset and you just want to fight or run away, that is a challenge to get out of. It really takes a lot of energy and effort. Whereas self-care, if we have some routines, we have, they kind of become even unconsciously conditioned. So we can essentially condition ourselves, use less energy, and be doing things preventatively that will help us be more resilient and keep us on this end of the mental health scale, the positive mental health scale. So I would highly recommend you watch my video about highly sensitive careers. I'll put the link at the top of the video here. And I mention in that video a book by a Russian gentleman named Mihaly, and then he has this really long name. But the book is called Flow, and it talks about flow states. Flow states are super important to highly sensitive people because, again, it's what Mihaly describes is that you're reducing psychic entropy. So, right, the chaos of your mind, when you get into a flow state, you're fully present. You are engaged in what you're doing. You are, really getting into the activity. Your mental chatter is turned off and your consciousness is totally in whatever you're doing. So my suggestion in the video was to use that to determine what kind of career you should do. I also suggest this for the differentiation between self-care and damage control, right? In self-care, you want to get into these flow states. You want to essentially, be engrossed in an activity where you lose yourself, and that is the most restorative thing. That promotes these healthy brain patterns. That helps you condition yourself as a highly sensitive person not to be so reactive and have to do so much damage control. So flow states are important to self-care. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a second, but I just wanted to touch on that briefly and refer you to that reference. It's an excellent book. I highly recommend it. And because we can differentiate between these two, but it's important to kind of keep them separate when we are trying to engage in them. I know a lot of highly sensitive people do resort to isolation as a means of self-care. And, isolation is kind of more of a damage control. It's when you're totally fried, your nervous system is burnt out, and now you are overwhelmed and you need to sit in a dark room for a while. You need to just totally unplug from the world. I don't recommend isolation as it's not a healthy damage control technique. It's kind of an emergency. And if you're using it consistently, my fear for you is that it's actually might increase your sensitivity. This is why, because if you need to use that as a maneuver, if you're like, okay, I can't take any more input, any more, amounts of data coming in, any more stimuli, I'm just tapped out. You use that consistently, that isolation, eventually, like, that is conditioning you and conditioning your body to say the only time I'm safe is when I'm isolated. When I'm in a dark room and I'm away from the world. And so that actually will over time increase your sensitivity. You're going to become more and more sensitive to when you do run into something that causes you to react. You're going to want to withdraw immediately. And so you're actually like kind of conditioning yourself, and I'll refer back to the fire triangle, the emotional fire triangle. I've talked about this before in other videos, but you're conditioning yourself and your body to have to withdraw. So isolation, and I know this because I have used it too, in really dark points of my being an HSP, I have reverted to isolation because I didn't know what else to do. And that is kind of created this downward spiral for me as far as my mental health. And also, it's hard when you do isolate yourself. What is your brain doing? Take a look at, does your brain really shut off? Your body might be sitting in the dark room, but then your brain, if you're ruminating about whatever happened to you, or trying to process it, you're still kind of activating the stuff in your body that isn't quite healthy, right? You're sending your body these, with these thoughts and these ruminations, you're still kind of keeping yourself in those unhealthy brain patterns. So even if you're withdrawing, and then you can kind of spiral downward into these darker and deeper places, because you're not being distracted from them, because you've taken away all the other distractions and you're sitting in this room by yourself. And so all you're doing is thinking about your problems or what's bothering you. And so, again, I don't know if this is a great strategy. I understand if you are having to use it right now. It's an emergency technique. But there are other options. There are other ways that we can turn damage control into self-care routines. So let's kind of get more into that side. Also, another caveat for self-care. Traditional, in the same vein, you have to remember, you need to engage, not only your mind, but your body when you're doing these self-care activities. Traditional self-care, does your brain engage, right? Let's say, for instance, taking a bath. I love taking baths. That's one of my self-care routines. Again, if you're sitting in the bathtub trying to relax, your body is relaxed, but again, what is your mind doing? Where is your mind as a highly sensitive person? We're very susceptible to rumination. We're very susceptible to kind of keeping ourselves in these emotional states by our own thought patterns, by the language we're using in our own heads. So what are you doing as you're doing this self-care stuff? Are you actually meditating, or are you sitting there worrying about, what you have to do today and what this person said to you? So it might be counterintuitive, but when you start to do some self-care stuff, you might need to incorporate another stimuli, an additional stimulus to whatever you're doing. So when I sit in the bathtub, I not only enjoy my bath, but I love to listen to Abraham Hicks. That's like my favorite. I can get lost in it. And that's exactly the point, right? I mean, my body is relaxed, right? I'm getting my physiology, into a safe place. And I am shutting off the chatter in my head by listening to Abraham Hicks and really engaging with it. It's something I find totally engaging. So I will listen to it, I'm listening to it, and my chatter is shut off, and then I'm not getting triggered by anything, by my own thoughts, right? I'm losing myself in the moment. I'm kind of getting into a flow state by adding this additional, something else, additional data that's coming into me. And so this is part of the ADHD aspect of being a highly sensitive person, is actually learning how to leverage a stimulus so that you can actually kind of disengage from all the other ones. For instance, when I sleep, I always have a fan or white noise, always. That helps my body disengage, because otherwise I will be waking up and trying to orient to any little noise that I hear in the house. The fan covers it up beautifully. And so with any self-care that you do, you might need to make sure that your mind and your body are both engaged, and so that is part of, again, shutting off your mental chatter, changing, so that your mind, all of your patterns of conditioning, your triggers are not getting activated. And you want to ask yourself, when you're doing your self-care, when you're, for me, it's sitting in the bathtub listening to Abraham Hicks, going for a walk and listening to an audiobook. Am I fully present in this activity? Am I totally present? Are my mind and body completely engaged in this? Because that you're closer then to a flow state. You're engaging in that flow state. You're shutting off your mental chatter. Your body's in a safe place, and that is the kind of self-care that we want to be doing. That is the best kind of self-care for a highly sensitive person to be doing, and it's restorative. It takes you out of yourself. You're not thinking about your problems. Your mind and body are at peace. You're engaged with the activity you're doing. And so that's the kind of self-care that we want to be engaged in, the kind of self-care that we want to be doing as highly sensitive people. And again, you can make routines out of these. You can make them so automatically a part of your day that they take very little energy, right? You just get up and do them, and they're this very healthy preventative stuff that keeps you from going into a reactive mode and fills your cup up before it gets tipped over and dumped by something. Because what happens if we don't do self-care? If we don't have these routines and rituals that we incorporate into our day, and we're kind of at this end. Some symptoms of being at this end, are isolating and leaning. So isolating, I talked about, having to totally withdraw yourself and sit in a dark room to recharge. Leaning too was one that I found myself in. A lot of highly sensitive people find themselves in this position where you are kind of mixed up maybe with a narcissistic personality, or you are leaning into an addiction of sorts. I was kind of addicted to this guy that I was seeing for a long time, and I was getting what I needed in terms of self-care by leaning on him, right? I wasn't creating it for myself. And so these are kind of the issues we run into if we are at this end of the scale and just doing damage control all the time. We might isolate or lean. As we move up onto this scale, we don't need to do those things anymore, right? We eliminate that need to use those things as self-care techniques, right? These are unhealthy self-care techniques. So, yeah, how can we turn damage control into self-care? Or how can we reverse? Maybe we are engaging in some things, we're finding ourselves upset a lot during the day. How do we kind of start to reverse damage control and turn it into self-care? We start to ask ourselves, how can I work with my body and mind, right? What's happening to me that I can control and make a routine out of? So for me, for an example, I am very sensitive to being hangry. I get hangry. So instead of continuing to be hangry and having to worry about keeping an emergency, I used to keep an emergency meat and cheese stick in my purse. So, and I would use it pretty often. So I realized I was like, okay, I need to instead of wasting energy in damage control, let's make a self-care routine to accommodate my body so that I eat regularly, eat every 2 to 3 hours. So what I did was I started, I have a breakfast, a mid-morning snack, lunch, a mid-afternoon snack, and then dinner. I ensured, I made a routine to ensure that I was eating every few hours so that was off the table, so that I knew I was never going to be hangry, and I incorporated that into my routine, my daily routine. So now it's automatic. And I immediately know, if I haven't had my snack or if I haven't had my lunch, I was like, okay, I'm on that right away. But that doesn't happen very often because it is a self-care routine for me. So look at, what things you're dealing with on a daily basis as far as damage control. Make a routine. It's trial and error. You get to keep tweaking this stuff. Create a self-care routine that will support that so that you turn it into preventative maintenance, into something that you constantly need to chase and fix and, repair. So if you are a highly sensitive person who is having some issues with damage control, I would love to help you. I have some excellent resources on my website, Emotional Fire Academy, and I'm here to help you as an emotion coach. So schedule a free consultation with me today on my website, and drop a comment below. I would love to hear what you think of this, if this helped you, if you found it fascinating, and if you agree with the mental health spectrum for highly sensitive people, and some of the stuff I talked about today. So thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Talk to you later.